Welcome to the Dental Decoders podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Rogars, and I'm here to help you crack the code on all things dental operations. Each week, we dive into topics to help you overcome roadblocks, streamline operations, and reduce team burnout. Whether you're an owner, a practice manager, or a team member, this podcast is for you. Join us for insightful discussions, engaging interviews, and practical tips. So sit back and relax as we crack the code on all things dental operations together. Hello, Decoders, and thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Super excited to be able to introduce you all to Joe Chickerillo with My Dental SOP. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super exciting. So for our listeners who maybe don't know who you are and haven't caught our previous episode with Laura from My Dental SOP, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and My Dental SOP?
Sure. I am born and raised in Chicago, only child, super nerdy, so I've always been into technology my whole life. I've been involved in dentistry for about the last 15 years. In that time, I've been involved, and even before that, I've been involved in several startup companies, helping take them to market. I really have a passion for building processes, and I love disruptive technology. I like the act of bringing something new and exciting into a marketplace that people get excited about. Interestingly, the most of my experience doing that has been on the patient-facing side or the client-facing side. And only just recently have I really realized that the piece that's missing from that is the glue that holds all that together, right? Which is the back end, which is where My Dental SOP comes in. So high-level overview, My Dental SOP is basically the first and only system in the dental space that takes all of your standard operating procedures and digitizes them so they become like instantly accessible by anyone at the practice. Also automates onboarding and new training for new hires, and really just keeps everybody doing things the way that you want them to be doing them.
That's super cool. I like that you are in the SOP space while saying that you love disruptive technology. Those two things don't seem like they would go hand in hand. But when you break it down, it actually does make sense. So I love that.
It's been really interesting because just the concept, I'll be honest, this is my own reaction to when Laura, who's the founder, reached out to me earlier this year. I was like, okay, standard operating procedures, SOPs, are like the least sexy topic like you could possibly. I'm like, okay, this doesn't excite me out the gate. But I started looking into it and I'm like, okay, I have been personally involved in so many different companies and technologies that have like FAQs and manuals, and like they just like people need to know how to use them, right? And there's this whole hiring crisis going on in dentistry for the last couple of years. Doesn't look like it's turning around anytime soon. So you have all this turnover and people that are coming in and don't know what to do, right? So their training, their onboarding tends to be relative to whoever's there at the time and available, and whatever that person's experience is from their own journey in dentistry, whether they're new, they're old, they're tech savvy, they're not tech savvy. So the funny thing is, I agree, it doesn't seem like it's disruptive at all, but I will tell you that every single dentist that I talk to, when they see it, they're like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this. Oh, my SOPs have been like this project we've been working on, but we really just don't know how to pull it all together. So I agree, but also I've been pleasantly surprised because it seems like everybody knows that they need this. It's just nobody knows what to do for it. You know what I mean?
100%. I am a systems and operations coordinator by trade, so that you're speaking my language. I get it in a way you can't quite understand. I love that. We were at the DSN event together when you guys had your booth there, and it was the hot spot. So you're definitely filling a need. It's definitely still disruptive while also being incredibly organized. That's my kind of disruption.
That's what I'm saying. It helps everybody.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how an office can use My Dental SOP to specifically help with the hiring and onboarding.
Yeah. So again, the interesting thing is every time I talk to anybody, whether they're inquiring with us or I'm just at some event or even just out in public and just meeting like people that are in the dental world, I always ask, like, what does your onboarding process look like? And usually it's not that it doesn't exist, but usually it's fluid. It's like some version of they do their new hire paperwork and then they do something that is like watching a video on a computer, or they go through the employee manual, they sit with the HR person for a little bit, and then they just go shadow people and just are thrown into the fire, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And everybody, it's interesting because the ADA says that 56% of all, this is a stat that I just learned earlier this year, so it's not like I did this research, but the ADA found that like 56% of all the employees that left the dental team after only 1 year, their answers for why they left all basically boiled down to poor onboarding. It was like, I didn't feel like I had the tools to succeed. I wasn't set up for success. I felt lost, or like I didn't have good training. And it all boils down to just like lack of onboarding. And if you look at what that winds up doing for a practice or just dentistry in general, the ADA also says that the average cost to hire or acquire a new employee, like a dental assistant, is $15,000. So if you have somebody leaving and coming in, if you just have not even a lot of turnover, but just a little bit, like it's just costing so much money. So everybody in the dental world, you talk about having the same standard of care for everybody, all the patients, right? So I'm talking about how do we get the same standard of care for all our new hires, get everybody on the same page, have everything digitized and standardized so that everybody gets that same standard of care when they come on board. The other sort of extended portion of that question is, when you have things like HIPAA compliance training or some new process or procedure, maybe you went to an implants course or an Invisalign course or something like that. So there's this whole new thing coming in, and now everybody at the current that's already on the team needs to be trained on all that stuff. So you can actually put all that stuff digitally into one platform, assign it to everybody, make sure they do it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that sounds incredibly amazing. I need something like that for my team. So I'll talk to you about that later. But
Awesome.
I find that it's the onboarding process in dentistry specifically. Like I've worked in a lot of different industries before I landed in dentistry. And the onboarding process at all of those jobs was very specific. Everybody went through the same thing. You watch this boring video, you fill out this boring form, you pass these tests, and then you get to actually do the thing by yourself. Dentistry was very surprising to me when I first started because on day one, they're like, you could answer the phone, right? And I'm like, I don't know the teeth numbers. I didn't know teeth were numbered. So I love that having that standard protocol in place will obviously help with retention. And it also, I think, in my opinion, helps with some of that. At my old office, we used to do it this way, like breaking those bad habits. Would you agree with that?
100%. That's what I mean about like when you're being trained or onboarded. It's so dependent on who the person is that's doing all that training and onboarding, because it's all relative to their experience, their reality that might be completely different than somebody else's. And it may or may not align with what the doctor and or the office manager wants them to be teaching these new employees. So, and that's the same with everything. Like that, it's the exact same thing with all the rest of the SOPs. It's not just the onboarding. That's why you have standard operating procedures. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And God forbid your office manager is the one who leaves, or that person who has all the knowledge is the one who you're having to replace. Then what do
Right.
you do? And if you don't have SOPs, you're kind of starting from scratch. And who's to know where the ball is going to be dropped? So I really appreciate having it in place for onboarding. I want to talk a little bit more about having it in place as you're going to courses and as you're learning more things. What does that look like? So I go to an Invisalign course. I learn a new thing. How do I get it from my brain into the platform, into the brains of my team?
So I don't want this necessarily to only be a sales pitch for us, because there are ways you can do this kind of on your own. Our platform just helps to really streamline it and automate it and consolidate it in a way that's really easy to use and organized and blah, blah, blah. But like the reality is anybody can have these standard operating procedures as long as they keep them organized and accessible to everybody in the practice, right? If you were using our platform, basically all the paperwork that you get for that, any processes that you want to write out, okay, this is how you present it when the opportunity kind of presents itself. This is what you want to say. This is what you want to do. Here's a video that talk about aligners in general. Here's a resource, a website that has FAQs about this type of stuff. All that basically gets copied and pasted into one module within the platform that everybody then gets access to. So the way that ours works is you can I always talk about it like it becomes the Google for the practice. So you can literally just type in the thing that you're looking for, whether it's Invisalign or like payment policy or new patient intake or whatever it is. And it pulls up exactly that thing. So you click into the module and it's got all the resources there for you. So to answer your question, how do you get it in there? It depends on what it is that you're trying to put in. If it's just in your brain, you can literally just type it all out. If you've got links, you can copy and paste. If you've got pictures, you can insert them. Videos, anything else. It's like editing like a Google document or a Word document where it's got all the same controls: bold, italic, add a bulleted list, add a link, add a picture, add a video, stuff like that. So it's super easy to do.
That sounds awesome. Now, how can I support my team members who maybe need to learn this new information? What are the different tools that I know we don't want to make it a sales pitch, which I appreciate very much, by the way, but I'm going to ask another salesy kind of question because I just want to know more. So if I'm building out this protocol that I want to teach my new team, we're going to implement this. What ways am I able to get that to my team members? Are there tests that they can take, or you said you can put links in there. Can we put videos and text so we can appeal to all the different learning styles? How does that all look?
Yeah, so first of all, it's fully customizable. You can have links, text, pictures, videos. You can have other websites. Let's say you had HIPAA compliance training that you have to do like once a year, right? But you use a third party for that. You can link out to that and then have your legal notice of why you need to do this, and here's what it entails, here's how you log in, and then the instruction on how to get to it, and then it'll take them right there. For the rest of the processes, how do you get it all in there? It's just like editing a Word document, like I said. But as far as getting it from now that it's in there into the hands of the people that you're trying to make sure that are learning it and following it, you basically have like everybody at the practice, everybody on the team gets their own login. So everybody has their own user, and everybody gets a designated level of access that typically, like the office manager, the owner, the doctor, somebody's in charge of creating, or HR person, right? In charge of creating that access for everybody. And you can assign them individual learning modules. So for instance, you might have one whole module that is like, here's just our standard SOPs for like kind of everybody in the practice, but then here's a role specific module that is only for receptionists. Here's another one that's for hygienists. Here's another one for assistants. Here's another one for a billing coordinator, right? And then as you continue to do new things, like for instance, you go to an Invisalign course and you want to, assign that to certain people, you can just create a new module and click like who you want it to go to. Okay, I want this assigned to all these different people. And additionally, the other cool thing I think that we do that some of the other systems that kind of can house material like this don't do is there's a level of accountability there that you can actually track how many of those modules they have completed and where they're at in that process. Hey, you guys have until the end of the week to read through this whole thing. It'll take you about an hour. Take the week to do it. On Friday, you can look and see who's actually completed this thing. Do you know what I mean?
That's awesome. The accountability piece is where I was hoping that we would get to in this, because that's always something that I think is really hard when you're in a busy practice, you're seeing patients, your phone is ringing, you're doing all the things. How do you implement something and then hold everybody accountable to actually consuming the knowledge on their own? So My Dental SOP has a tracker. Can I ask an off left field question here and say, how do you support your team members who are maybe having a hard time with that accountability piece? Does My Dental SOP have like reminders or things in it that we can implement to make sure we're gently nudging Stacy over there who hasn't completed that homework assignment that we asked?
Yeah, so the reality is there are reminders like notifications built into the platform, but the reality is the way that it actually functions in real life. Like you think about how let's say you in your dental office, you're going to implement this yourself, and you're the one that's in charge of it. You're leading the initiative. The reality is you're going to go, okay, hey team, this is our new thing. I'm going to assign this to everybody. Make sure you go through and do this. You have until the end of the week. At the end of the week, yes, you'll have reminders and stuff, but like the reality is at the end of the week, you're going to go, hey, these 4 people, you guys, great job. Hey, Joe, what the heck? Why didn't you do this thing? It's typically a conversation that just happens because somebody's monitoring that on a regular basis. Do you know what I mean? Not like you need to spend like hours doing it. You just, it's literally one click of a button, see the whole team. And like you click to see, there's like a progress button, course progress, I think it's called. You click that and it'll show you exactly how far they've gotten.
So it reminds you, but it also lets you know where you need to facilitate those conversations and try and figure out what barriers are keeping them from getting the work done. So
100%.
Beautiful. Love that. So for an office who maybe doesn't have an HR, their office manager is old school, they've got everything stored in her mind. What does the process look like, or where's the most important place for them to start when it comes to getting things written down? Or do you have stuff already in there that we can share?
Yeah, actually, so sort of a multi-part question there.
For sure.
It's
I'm good at that.
very common for most dental practices. I don't know if I'd say most, but a really significant portion of dental practices where it's all, I would call it tribal knowledge. Like the people that have been there the longest, and usually the office manager, it's all in their head. It's like keys to the kingdom. The problem is that becomes a bottleneck because anybody that needs to know how to do something, it's like, I always ask, if somebody has a question now, where did they go for the answer? And the answer is usually the doctor or the office manager. Good thing those 2 people don't have anything else to do during the day, right? So yeah, you're right. The challenge comes to, okay, how do we translate everything from the office manager's brain into this system? Now, most often there are some protocols that exist in the practice. So people will have, like, I always joke, there's always a binder. There's always a binder collecting dust in a corner somewhere. And it's usually like, it's dusty. There's like little sticky notes hanging off of it in different places. So if you have physical material like that, you can actually mail it to us like snail mail, and we will digitize that for the practice. Anything that they have in their head that they want to put in writing, they can do that themselves, or they can work with us to do that kind of with them / for them. The other thing, which was the last part of your question, was do we have anything to supplement that? I would call it filling in the gaps. And yes, we do. So the person who founded the company is actually a former dental consultant. So we're actually using a lot of the content that she used to use with her clients And it needs to be customized, but it's a really, really excellent starting point that's very plug and play. There's like very specific, obvious fields that we do with you on the onboarding, like plug in your practice name, plug in the doctor's name, plug in your like address and logo and your branding so it looks like it's your system. And we give you all that to start with as a starting. So if you didn't have anything, now you've at least got a decent framework for it that is, again, admittedly fairly generic, but you want to customize that then to each kind of practice that we're working with. So it depends entirely on the scenario that they have. Do they have some stuff? Is it all in their head? Is it some in their head? Do they want to use some of our stuff? Do they want to use all of our stuff? We're completely flexible and customizable to whatever the practice needs, if that makes sense.
So we've been looking at this, or I have been looking at this from like an existing office looking to level up. But what I didn't think about, and what sparked when you were talking about having those resources available, is startup offices, brand new baby practices who want to be organized from the get-go. They will now have access to the existing knowledge bank as well, which I think is incredibly powerful, because in those startups, it's so important to start off on the right foot. You don't have a lot of time to get your sea legs before you have to start making money and hiring teams and treating patients. So I think that's a really incredible offer for startup practices too, then, which is outside of what I was originally thinking.
Yeah, no, you're right. I would say that probably about a third of our inbound interest actually comes from startup practices. There's a couple of groups that you are probably familiar with that work with startups specifically to help coach and guide them in all kind of aspects of opening a new, like a de novo clinic. And a lot of times that involves creating SOPs with them or for them. And so we actually work really nicely with that, even if it's just a standalone practice that's, somebody doing their own thing for the first time. Yeah, they can basically use our entire framework to help build out their own processes. The other cool thing that you may not have thought of that I have just in the last couple months been telling everybody at demo about this is every clinic has all these third-party systems that help run it, right? You've got your practice management software, so Dentrix, Open Dental, EagleSoft, something like that. A lot of practices are using third parties for online scheduling or analytics or reviews management or like AI radiography and things like that. All those different third party systems and the HIPAA compliance, any of those third party systems, you can actually import all of that into the same into its own module, into the same platform, so that you have one repository for everything that somebody could want to look up. When I talk about, like, for instance, Dentrix as an example, it's not, that you can't go, you wouldn't want to necessarily go to their website, but we can have a module called Dentrix or practice management software, and it'll have the link to their website, their manual, their FAQs, your login information maybe, or just general stuff that you guys want to know, that everybody should know this thing about when they're using Dentrix. And that applies to any third-party software at all. So again, to your point with a startup clinic, like, man, when they're just starting out and everybody's super busy, there's only a couple of people on the team, it's really crucial to have all that stuff so that when you hire the next person, you're not bogging down the 2 or 3 that are already there. You know what I mean?
100%. I am, if you may not know, but I'm an Open Dental software trainer. We specifically help offices learn how to use Open Dental. And
No
the
kidding,
amount of people, yeah, now you do. Fun fact. Nice to meet you. So one of the things that I see offices do a lot is I'm going through the Open Dental manual online and I found 15 SOPs for how to do this one thing. Which way is the right way? None of them are necessarily wrong, but if you have your office's way that you guys all do it and you standardize it, you stick that in your SOP database, then you know where to look too, because there's nothing wrong with Googling, how do I do this on Dentrix? But you're going to find a lot of different answers. Which one is the right one? So exactly. Love that. This has been a great conversation. Before we get into our signature question, I want to make sure I'm already knowing that our audience is going to want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you guys do. Where can they find you? And you guys also have a really great offer for our listeners too. So I'm hoping that they take advantage of that. So I'll let you take it away. Where can they find you? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So I actually, just in case I had the ability to do this, and it looks like I do on this platform, I created a slide so that anybody can see this, schedule a demo using that first QR code. The second one is actually, I was talking about, this doesn't necessarily have to explicitly be a sales pitch. It's really about helping people in general do this. You can do all this yourself. It's just a heck of a lot easier if you're using us, right? Mm-hmm. But we do have this cool SOP guide that we wrote up that's basically, here's the type of SOPs that you want, here's how to implement them, here's how you should document them and make them accessible and all that stuff if you wanted to do it on your own. That's that second one. It's a free guide to download. It's, I want to say, like an 8-page PDF. But like for somebody who's looking into doing this for maybe the first time, download that. It's completely free. Check it out. And you can do it yourself. And if you want to talk about having it fully automated, streamlined, having us import all that stuff, set up a demo, I'm happy to take anybody through the platform. The promo I was going to offer for anybody that's listening to this podcast, I don't know when it's going to air exactly, but whenever it does air, we'll give you basically that entire month, whatever. If it comes out in November 1st, you've got all of November, and we'll give you 60% off of the setup fee. So just mention that you heard about us on the podcast, and you'll get that discount.
That is such a great deal. So appreciate you guys. Also, just side note, your marketing person, team, whatever, on point. Everything you guys do, your social media is adorable. It's all branded. I'm obsessed. So just throwing that out there. Yeah. So
not me, but I just told it's one person who's in charge of that team, and I just told her yesterday. I'm like, man, everything you do is so on point. I absolutely love it.
I always, I don't have to look when something of yours comes up or something of My Dental SOPs comes up. I'm like, oh, that's My Dental SOP, because it's just, she nails it every time. It's very consistent. I'm kind of jealous. Enough about your marketing woman, man, person. Anyways, as we wrap this episode, we always end with one signature question, and that is, in your experience, what has been your decoding moment or secret code that's allowed you to be successful?
So I actually listened to a few of the other podcasts before this one. So I had an idea that this was coming up, and I thought about it. And first of all, there's a lot of things that come to mind, but one of the more common questions that you get when you're doing things like a podcast or a meet and greet or a networking event or anything like that is, what's the best business book you've ever read? Or like, what's your favorite podcast that helps you, blah, blah, blah. And one thing that I feel like gets overlooked and is probably the most important thing for me and my professional life has been, I've been really blessed to have a series of really excellent mentors through my whole life. I think finding a mentor that you can learn from, that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can brainstorm and just network with and things like that, I think is probably the most underrated aspect of having a professional career. Like I said, I've been really lucky to have several, basically from the time I was 18 at my first job, second job, working at Starbucks through college, all the way through, like to this day, I still have a couple of people that I go to when I just want to hash out an idea or let out some frustration or look for advice, because these people know me really well. They know my path and the way that my brain works. And when you're doing anything, you tend to get in the weeds about whatever it is because you're the one that's in it. So to have a third party outside perspective come in and be able to give you objective advice based on not having any knowledge of whatever's going on in the weeds, so to speak, I think is the most valuable thing that I've ever found from a professional perspective.
Absolutely love that answer. I have a fantastic mentor who I've been lucky enough to have on the show, so I 100% agree with you there. Thank you so much for taking the time out to jump on this call, share your wealth of information with us, and help us learn more about you and My Dental SOP.
I mean, I love that we had to have this conversation and that you asked me very salesy questions. I was not planning on that, but loved it.
I get really excited about new things, so you're welcome.
Cool. Love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Dental Decoders podcast. We hope you took away a valuable piece of information. As always, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to help us build our community of dental decoders. We look forward to seeing you for next week's episode.